In the morning, we heard a few ideas of like what our mayors and council members wish to do in the currently just started municipal term. But what we also wanted to see is to broaden our outlook a little bit to our Central and Eastern European region, and to see whether we have similar issues, similar solutions, and whether we can learn from each other. And I'm really hoping to see some examples where Hungarian municipalities could, take some lessons and improve how they disclose their data or how they try to include citizens in their everyday decision making. We also try to research these good practices from our neighboring countries. But then we realized it's much better to ask the local civil society organizations who are much more familiar with their terrain than we are. So we invited, and please welcome 5 members of civil society organizations from the region who will help us put our transparency issues on a regional map, and will hopefully inspire us to some better practices. I'll introduce just the first presenter, and then I'll ask everybody as they come on the sort of podium to introduce themselves. So please welcome Nejc Horvat from Je Nov Dan. Today is a new day.
Hi, everyone. First presenter after lunch, tough spot to be in. But hopefully these absolutely horrid examples of municipal transparency will wake everybody up. So my name is Nejc. I come from the Slovenian NGO Je Nov Dan, or Today's a New Day. We do a lot of things, but very sort of briefly, we use technology in different ways to make democracy work better, to open public space, to enhance political participation and fight for greater transparency and public accountability. But we also try to democratize tech and make technical developments work for the better of all people. In doing this, we work closely with municipalities in a lot of different ways. And so today I want to sort of present a view of like openness and transparency of Slovenian municipalities, how we got to know them through this research, which I'll talk about also in the later panel. But first, Slovenia has 212 municipalities, which is a crazy number for a country of 2 million people. So our capital, Ljubljana, has around 300,000 citizens, and then like half of all our municipalities don't even have 5,000 people, citizens, and there's some that have like 100 people. And while they're sort of municipalities have a lot of autonomy to govern themselves, and there's no regional autonomous bodies. So as you can imagine, it's quite a wild west in how open and transparent each municipality is, especially since our law basically states that each municipal council decides by themselves how open and transparent they should be in their own statute. So basically they sort of regulate themselves. And so all of these factors make it like a quite a varying landscape of openness, transparency, and participation. And so to get a better understanding of this, in 2022 we did our openness and transparency ranking of Slovenian municipalities. It was quite an extensive research. Like I said, I'll just briefly mention it now and talk about it more in the next panel. But we basically checked every municipality, their websites, their sort of legislature and legal documents, and then we did this ranking, which you can see here. And so right now in this panel, I just want to briefly go through some practical examples of how municipalities can really do minor tweaks and really sort of enhance their openness towards citizens. Now, open municipal operations, it doesn't necessarily just mean publishing stuff online and then, you know, you throw your hands up and that's it. You actively have to sort of bring these information closer to citizens, right? But then you'll see that like a lot of Slovenian municipalities will simply sort of join all the sort of session documents in one huge PDF, scan it, publish it online. You have like 400 pages of a document that's scanned. You can't even like Control F search through it. And so imagine you're only interested in like a park in front of your house. You'll never be able to find anything in this. So this is like a huge problem. And then also a brilliant thing is like a lot of municipalities will simply just put all of the documents for a particular session in one zip file, put it on their website, and then you have to download this, and then you have to go through all the documents, and then, oh my God, it was in another session, and do all of this again. So it's just like a terrible practice. And this is really, like it happens in a lot of municipalities, right? And then is like data presented in a way that is understandable to citizens. Again, here's like good and bad naming of attachments. On the sort of left-hand side, you'll find like an example of a municipality that really does like transcript, then suggestions, then questions from this guy, and then this act and that act and stuff like this. And here you just have like material A, material B, material C, and then letters of the alphabet, right? And this is a very simple tweak you can do that'll make a citizen's life so much easier, and it takes 5 minutes out of your day, right? And it really can change someone's interaction with the municipality. Then can citizens follow the work of the municipal council? Again, only like 5 Slovenian municipalities publish actual transcripts of their sessions. But I can understand that's very time consuming and you need resources, right? So a good sort of minutes of meeting will also do the trick, right? There's like 61%, I think, of municipalities that simply here's like a case of a bad minutes of a meeting where it's just like, this councillor asked a question, the mayor answered it, and then that's it. It's like, what was the question, what was the answer? You don't know, you'll never know. And then you have like an example of a good sort of minutes of the meeting where it's an actual name, and then this person asked if this act does this, and then the mayor answered, yes, this act does that, and it does that. And so you actually have like, again, this is probably something that's gonna take a bit more time, it's gonna take a bit more resources, but it's such an like fundamental document, a municipal session transcript, that you really, really should put some work into it, right? Because this is, you rather just not put anything there. If it's just like this guy asked a question, then this guy answered, you don't need to bother with that, right? Budgets. I'd say a budget is again like one of the most important documents a municipality will put out in a particular term. Again, what we found, a large majority of our municipalities will simply take this incredibly technical document with columns and numbers and stuff like that. They'll scan it, they'll publish it online, and that's it. You can't do anything with that. You can't Control F search stuff. There's no way you can interact with this unless you're an accountant or a lawyer, right? And you shouldn't be an accountant or a lawyer to see where municipal funds go, right? But there were a handful of examples of municipalities who did really well here and really stood out. There's a sort of an example on your left-hand side where a municipality published like outgoing funds, projects that they funded, and you can go through the map, click on this road, this park, and really it interactively shows you how much money, when the project was started, when it was finished, and it's a really amazing tool. And on the right-hand side, it's like a visualized sort of budget, funds and EU money, like funds we got, taxes and stuff like that. And yeah, that was in 2022, a handful of examples. Then we sort of developed our tool, which is called Open Books. It's quite a basic sort of thing that visualizes a municipality's budget. It's free of charge, it's open source. It takes a day to input all your budgetary information into it, and then you just embed it on your website. And you can, like, a person who comes on your website clicks through it, and it shows like incoming funds, outgoing funds, this year's budget, last year's budget, stuff like that. And then you can go levels deeper into it. And we also did a version for NGOs, so we don't get attacked by, you know, Soros money and stuff like that. Okay, how am I doing on time? I don't know. Then we also checked, like, accessibility. How accessible are websites for people with disabilities, right? With various types of disabilities. There's a law in Slovenia that states all public websites need to be accessible to, like, visually impaired people, people who can't use a mouse to click through the website, people that you know, need to use a reader for stuff like going through website documents and stuff like that. Again, even though there's a law, like, half of the municipalities pay no mind. Even I can't see, like, the contrast here, right? Imagine if, like, you're colorblind or stuff like that. There's no way you can interact with a bad example like that. And then again, yeah, accessibility. This is an example of, like, attachments for a municipal session, right? It's just MMA bin.php. Material 6, just random numbers here, like, what is this? How can you? There's no way you can interact with this unless you really, for every session, open every document and then find the things you're interested in, right? There's no way you'll find anything. And then the last one, this one really took the cake. It's the last sort of content we searched for is, like, public involvement and communication of a municipality. And for this, we prepared a questionnaire and sent them out to municipalities, right? Out of 212 municipalities, for the 4 months they were able to answer this questionnaire, 50 did. 50 answered. So 3/4 of municipalities in 4 months weren't even able to provide these answers, even though they're accounted by law that they have to answer, like, citizens' requests. So basically they didn't even open our email. And so yeah, we then researched here if they have Facebook pages or like if they have a form on their website where citizens could input their suggestions and comments. Do they then publish these comments online? And also we researched, like, do they have participatory budgeting? I think around 30 municipalities in 2022 had participatory budgeting. I think this number is now sort of growing, which is great to see. Yeah, then we did this neat little page. We ranked all the municipalities. We kind of allowed citizens to compare, because Slovenians notoriously envious of their neighbors. So they saw, oh my God, our neighbors have like 60 points. Why don't we have like 40? And then they bugged their mayors, and stuff actually started moving. So the presentation actually made quite a lot of sense. And I guess I'll stop now. If there's one thing I want to sort of leave with, is that I think openness and transparency, these are mindsets, right? It's not that most of these municipalities, they aren't like untransparent because of malice, right? It's just that nobody in Slovenia ever really before us ever got to them and told them, hey, be open and transparent. You have to do just this and that and you'll be better. And then they start to sort of think about it and move small things, and those small things can lead to then bigger things. And so I'd say NGOs keep sort of interacting with municipalities and pushing them towards these things, and municipalities try not to look at NGOs just as people who bug you, but people who actually know that these things can make a difference. And so, yeah, let's all work together. Ljubljana is this one, so I'll talk about this in the next panel. Please come. this is actually the darker a municipality is, the more points it got. And then, yeah, this is the 8th one and the 25th one. You could click on the, very interactive. I'll show it. I don't want to sort of take time from everybody else. Thank you so much.
So hello everyone. My name is Tomáš Münzberger and I'm a lawyer from NGO Oživení, Czech NGO. We are anti-corruption organization who specialize in advising municipalities, representatives on decision-making processes, active citizens in corruption cases, and whistleblowers. We also specialize in municipal media, meaning newspapers, and in the case of regions, we also focus on regional TVs. I will talk about one of our projects is called Transparentní Česko, Transparent Czechia, and this is a transparency audit of municipalities and regions. In 2023, we did the first round. We rated 100 most populous Czech cities, and this year we rated all 13 Czech regions. I will talk about this also more in the next panel. And I want to touch on 3 aspects of transparency that I believe are kind of translatable into other national settings. And yeah, let's start with that. So the first part is is one aspect that we rated is information on the members of the council. And I was told that we are specifically quite heavily focused on this aspect in comparison to others. So let me say a few things about it. When we rate the transparency of the municipalities, we found out that the websites are, the structure of the websites are very different. It's a maze. And it's very hard to navigate, and even for us, and so more. That means that even more for active citizens and others. Yeah, but we cannot tell municipalities where to put which data, but it makes sense to put some data together for just to make it accessible. I think there was someone mentioning in a panel before the lunch that accessibility is a very important part of transparency, and I can really agree with it. This is a automatically translated screenshot of the questions. Let's see. This is an example of quite a good practice, I would say, of city of Liberec, and what we want to see is that if in the list of council representatives there's some basic information like contact. It is not always the case that there's even an email, sometimes the email address is missing, etc. Then we want to see the political affiliation, and if you click on more information, you can also see some further information like if the politician sits on a committee of the municipality board or on the committee of the council. Here you can see that none of that is the case, but then he's in the working group for the collaboration with investors for public infrastructure, and then also you can see that he's a member of the supervisory board of one of the city-owned companies. And this should also work reciprocal, like when you look up the control committee then you should be able to see who sits, who is a member, and who is the chair of this committee, etc. So I think this is quite efficient. It's not too much to ask, and it saves a lot of time. It's important for active citizens to connect the dots. It's important to other citizens when they want to approach the right member of the council, etc. The second aspect that I want to touch on is information on decision-making processes. This is the holy grail of the information that is present on the municipal websites, and I will sound a little bit like a broken record after the first presentation. But one of the questions we asked are the minutes of the council meetings published on the website, and you can see that 40% of the 100 most populous municipalities do not. Also, the minutes of the council is something that contains some discussion. You can see who was against, why, and what were the arguments. So let's see. This is a good practice that I took from a region, but the legislation for publishing these informations is the same for regions and cities, so I don't think that really matters. And here you can see that there are different meetings of the council, and you can, when you click on the minutes, which is the middle one, then you get a searchable text with links that take you to exact documents. Just as Nejc said, we often see like 150 pages long PDF that's scanned, not searchable, etc. This is much better. And another feature is that you can click on the voting, and you get this nice table where you see by party affiliation who voted yes, who voted no, etc. And another aspect of municipal transparency that I want to talk about is whistleblowing. Since 2021, since December 2021, the directive on the protection of persons who report the breach of union law is in direct effect for the municipalities with over 10,000 inhabitants. And this is, to us, this is a very important topic. We asked by Freedom of Information Act request the municipalities in 2023 how many requests, how many reports did they receive, and the number was very, very low. I'm not sure now the exact number, and when we asked this year the regions, the number was actually 0. This is not because there's no breach of law that could be reported. That's definitely not the case. This is because there's no culture supporting whistleblowers. Usually there's the opposite. And so we want to support creation of the so-called speak-up culture. We can find speak-up culture, for example, in England, in the UK, in National Health Service, where they really try to promote speaking up not only on breaches of law, but also on different issues. And so one of the things that we rated was, does the website contain also something else than just the legally legal mandatory information, like who is the person that you should report to, etc. And this is one of the examples. The municipality of Brno has questions and answers For potential whistleblowers, you can see like questions like, what if my wife also, or my partner also works in the, like in the under the same employer? Can I'm worried for her. Then there's like affirmation, or there's a sentence that family members of the whistleblowers are also protected by the legal system, etc. So, because this is what we rated as a good practice, because we often found that what was on the website was just like the legal bare minimum, and usually the message that person gets when they read those legal bare minimums is that the speaking up is not supported. There is also a special application that the municipality of Brno uses that is very secure, and you can even see that if you want to contact a psychologist outside of the regime of reporting, that you can do that as well anonymously. So that's another bonus. But we didn't rate this. This would be, I think, the only city that would get points for this. So that would be, I think, too much. Okay, I think I will end with this, but you can. I will talk more about the project in the next panel, and but you can check the rankings on this website. And thank you for your attention.
Hello everyone, my name is Božena. I'm from Ministry of Space Collective. It's a Belgrade-based collective committed to democratizing urban development in fields of housing, affordable housing, urban planning, green infrastructure, and so on. So today I mostly want to tell you about one of our approaches that regards the direct collaboration and direct support to the local communities that we do through our service or resource center called Urban Planning Crisis Headquarters. Just a bit about participation in urban planning in Serbia. So we still haven't transitioned to what we call participatory urban planning. So we are still stuck in something that's called the rational approach to urban planning. The main characteristic of that approach is that nominally urban planners as experts are the central stakeholder when it comes to urban planning. And there is not much space for citizens and for public to participate. That's why we actually, in the whole procedure, we only have two formal mechanisms for citizens and public participation. I will talk about those mechanisms in a bit. So there is a huge gap actually between public institutions responsible for urban planning and citizens, because there is a huge amount of mistrust in institutions, which are very non-transparent. The procedures are not transparent, and the effects of participating in these two mechanisms are unknown actually to the citizens who actually took part, because there is no significant political effects of participation in urban planning. So I just stated 8 key steps of developing urban plan. Also the spatial plans and urban plans drafted on the national and local level are all going through these steps. You can see that only in 2 steps we do have a participation, or the process opens for the public. Each other step is completely closed for the public. There is no information about what's going on, how the concept of the plan is being developed, what will be the planning solutions. And also when some key decisions are made in this process, they are published, but just upon their adoption. So we don't know when or what is being adopted. So we do have this early public insight into the concept of urban plan, and we do have a public insight followed by a public session with Urban Planning Commission, which actually represents the key and central decision making institution or body in this process. So the legal minimum for citizen participation in urban planning are these two public insights. Both of them are being announced and published on a city website, in some corner of the city website where you wouldn't expect them to be, and in some newspaper, but each time different newspaper, so you never know where you can find this information. So information is just that urban planning is being presented in early public insight lasts for 15 days, public insight lasts for 30 days. That's a minimum, but in practice it's maximum, like there is no a day longer than 15 or 30 days. And when the information is announced, there is no any materials or presentation of the plan. So we have a draft or concept of the plan on 100 or 200 pages with some graphic illustrations that are not understandable to anyone who isn't architect or urban planner. So people, even when they see information, they don't actually know what plan is proposing, what the planning solution means, what will be the consequences or effects of such spatial solution. So people can read the plan if they somehow obtain the information about insight, but they, in most cases, they cannot understand what is being proposed. These both occasions, they permit citizens to write written complaints or suggestions to the plan, and they, you cannot send them by email, you have to send them by post, by mail, and so you can just write whatever you want, but you will never get a feedback from the institutions. So you don't know if you, if your participation has any effects on the plan. Also, there is this public session with Planning Commission, but it's, maybe you think it's a discussion, but it's not. It's like more of a public hearing where each citizen who submitted a complaint or some comment, they can elaborate their written comments, and they can ask questions, but neither the Planning Commission or other institutions will engage into discussion or answer questions. So that would be urban planning process and participation. So we do have in these terms of like defining the level of participation on paper and in the legal framework, we are somewhere here at the level or of informing and consultation, but in practice it actually doesn't work quite well. So we also did in 2021 we did a monitoring report where we measured the levels of participation in urban planning in Belgrade. So the results show us that only 33% of all legal possibilities to include citizens in urban planning in Belgrade are being actually practiced. So there is just 1/3 of possibilities realized in 2021. We also did a public opinion poll in 2021, and we got the results that show us that 62% of citizens say that they are not included. They don't think they are being included enough in urban planning in Belgrade. 49% of citizens, they say they are not properly informed about urban development procedures. Then 52 of them also says that they think that the whole city is actually being developed in accordance with private interests of elites that are close to city and national governments. So in that atmosphere, in Belgrade and the other cities, but we are mostly focused on Belgrade, we have a lot of local communities that are being organized around some of these proposed urban plans to which they oppose, like they are opposing to proposed planning solutions. And in most cases, they are quite angry because they are being they were informed very late in the process. So they're already city already has a draft of the plan, and it is basically almost a finished document. And that's the point in the process where citizens actually find out that there is a plan being developed at the first place. So they want to be part of that process. They want to be included. And they want to engage. So we actually, that was like a point where we actually provide support and assistance to these communities to empower them to take an active role in that process, so they can actually participate. And we are doing a monitoring of 4 urban plans being developed in Belgrade. We inform the public about all those plans, and we do work with active and self-organized communities in terms of empowering them through providing information and education about urban planning. So when it comes to informing the public, we are doing that through our social media. That is one way, but not just providing information that there is some urban plan being developed, but we also provide the information what is proposed in that urban plan, what are the effects of that plan, or the possibilities or scenarios of that plan, and we are trying to target the specific area of the city where that plan is actually being developed. The results of this type of informing are that some citizens actually see this information and then organize with their neighbors, and then they contact us, or we start our collaboration, and they actually want to be part of the process. Other way of informing the public about urban plans that are being developed is this GIS platform we developed. It's called Where is the Plan? So it shows in real time all urban plans in Belgrade that are in the process of development, but in which stage the development is. And when you click on some of those plans that are maybe covering the place or the street or the building you live in, you can find then information about the stage of that development process, and you can find links and information, what can you do in that stage, where can you find materials, how should you read the plan, some tutorials, manuals, guidelines, what to do, how to read, who to contact, and so on. Then usually when we do have a collaboration and with some local community, this empowering process mostly is focused on transferring our knowledge, our specific knowledge about urban procedures and urban planning to the community, so that community can develop some critical attitude, or develop a base of critical knowledge about the very plan, so they can actually take part in the formal procedures and use these institutional mechanisms provided by law. So we are actually meeting with the community, usually in some space in the community center that is familiar to all the people there. And we are actually doing the analysis of the plan and then translating that to the people through various workshops. And there are actually various tools and manners how to translate very specific knowledge about urban planning, the procedures and the contents of the plan to the community. We are also doing trainings with the community, how should they prepare with this public session with Urban Planning Commission, and we are also training them to write complaints, how they should how to build argumentation about the plan, about how to articulate their needs into the planning solutions. So that would be one aspect of it, but we are also providing them with tools which we developed, such as manuals. This here is a manual for defending space, which can actually, it covers, it is basically a guideline step by step what community can do in 3 different scenarios that are most common when it comes to urban planning in Belgrade. We also developed like small guideline through urban planning where citizens can introduce themselves with some terminology, some processes, institutional mechanisms, and actually have assistance in writing complaints. We also provide very specific guidelines about how to organize on a very local level, how to fundraise. We are also doing workshops with them, very specific workshops, and we are dedicating a lot of our efforts into building networks of all these different communities across the city so they can connect and join forces in some cases. We also developed a platform which it's called Urban Planning Crisis Headquarters Platform, where citizens can find answers to most frequently asked questions. There is a library here. There is also stories about other initiatives and other groups. And there are also YouTube tutorials about where can they find information, how should they read plans, how to address issues to the institutions. And I just wanted to briefly say what did it all contribute to. So we managed to, over the 5 years, we managed to increase the understanding and interest of the citizens in urban planning in Belgrade, and to make these formal mechanisms that are pretty close to for the public, to make them a bit popular and to increase the interest of citizens into urban planning and these public insights and public session with the Planning Commission. It also contributed to increased mobilization of citizens on a very local level, on the level of their neighborhoods, but also on the city level. So when it comes to some city projects or some huge city constructions, citizens are eager to mobilize about those issues. Some of the groups we worked for years, they are now completely independent, but not just independent in terms that they can do all the stuff, everything regarding urban planning procedures, but themselves, but they are also highly influential on the local level. So they are gathering others and they are sharing their knowledge and experience with other communities. So they become a central point on some municipal level in the city. Some citizens groups also managed to stop some unwanted constructions and to actually achieve their goals in protecting some common spaces in their neighborhoods. So that was like probably the biggest success stories. So yeah, that would be it from me of this topic.
Hi, my name is Szymon. I'm from Poland, from Sieć Obywatelska Watchdog Polska. We are an NGO and we mostly focus on the right to information, to obtain information and to disseminate it on both local and central level. And I'd like to talk to you about something I think quite exciting that's happening in Poland right now, about social participation in the process of protecting forests. And it concerns so-called communal forests. And that's a semi-formal term. It basically describes any forest area that's important for local community. And it sounds incredibly vague because it is, and it's quite a good thing because it can be any wooded area that is popular. If it's a place when people go walk their dogs, or it's a popular, hanging out spot, or if it's important from biodiversity point of view, or from cultural or historical point of view, it can be a so-called communal forest. And it was a term that was just floating around for quite some time, and it was for quite some time an object of a friction between local government, state forests, which I will talk about in a bit, and social activists, because those forests are just important for people. There was a poll for Pracownię na rzecz wszystkich istot, Lab for All Living Beings, and up to 85% of respondents support protecting important forests. Polish people just like forests, as it turns out. And to be fair, central powers were making some attempts to answer this need as far back as 2021, but it was very modest, and the entire thing started for real just last year. Here's another poll that shows priorities about forestry. As you can see, people care about cultural and those ecologically regulating aspects of forests, not necessarily about provisioning aspects, so selling wood. A little bit about political background, because it's actually important. I try to be brief. In autumn of last year, there were elections on central level, and previous opposition won, so-called democratic oppositions, and they promised a change of direction, because previous power was, to put it kindly, sometimes illiberal or questionable, and previous oppositions were basically saying that we are changing this direction, we're coming back to more democratic practices. And among other things that they promised, there was a promise to protect forests from deforestation. So that was previous fall. In January, we have new leadership of Lasy Państwowe, because when power changes, as it is, there is a sweep and new people come in, and state forest is an important an actor in this whole procedure, often a villainous one, but not always. Lasy Państwowe is a government holding that manages Polish forests. Important thing is that they are required by law to be self-sufficient financially. However, if there is a surplus of money, it goes back to the budget. So we have very clear incentive to make money as Lasy Państwowe. And how do you make money when you manage forests? You sell timber. So obviously that was this place of friction, because social activists and local communities could see that the place when I walk around walking my dogs, there were trees, and now there aren't because there's lodging. And social activists for years were fighting to protect those areas, and new leadership of Ministry of Climate and Environment tried to answer this need. First in January by first moratorium, which was sort of a misfire, because it happened quite suddenly with not much of a consultation, and mostly business side felt damaged because of how quickly it happened. So ministry changed approach a little and called something called Ogólnopolska Narada o Lasach, so General Council of Forests, which is basically a series of meetings, of consultations with various actors about state of Polish forests and how to protect them, how to manage them in a new way. So it was representatives of ministry, of state forests, of local governments, and of local activists that apply to the ministry. And it all happened in April this year, so it's still going on. It's supposed to be a first council, and we hope there will be another, but that's to be seen. But there are already some results, and this is the ministry order to General Director of State Forests to provide propositions of areas for communal forests. What does it mean? The director was ordered to design areas of forest that will be those communal forests and will be protected from deforestation, from logging. So, and in this process, there was required to be a presence of local governments and social activists. So this is a big chance for a civic side to come to the table and to say that we know that this is an important place for us. This is when people use this forest. We need it because of the climate, because it's a part of our, identity, our culture. Do not cut trees there. And initially it was supposed to be 9 big city areas, later expanded to 11. And this is a neat little map. And this is where I am from, and there are no protection for forests there. Hopefully it will happen in the future, if there will be a forest there in the future. And so we have like 11 teams and 11 local government, not 11 local government units, 11 areas with local government units and 11 local state forest districts. So we had plethora of experiences from every side. And what's the closest to our usual practice is access to information and transparency. So transparency of these proceedings. And according to ministry published a framework, essentially, how those proceedings should go. And among requirements was transparency. So meetings are to be minuted, this is required, and recorded if the participants agree, which is understandable, even if it's not ideal, because I think that it not applies just to this kind of institutions, but I think that everyone who has some experience with any kind of session, there can be disagreements about protocol. And it's nice to have a recording. And in our practice, we encounter situation time and time again when there are two sides that say different things about what happens. So we were basically helping social side to provide argumentation why those recordings are necessary, are very important, because just the protocol is not enough. And transparency of those meetings, as of today, is unequal, although right now it's better than at the start. I think that the most egregious example was Trójmiasto, which is right here, where social side reported big difficulties in acquiring document, including a framework regulations, because state forests were not willing to share it. Only after some pressure they agreed to do that. So that's nice of them. And but from the other hand, Kraków, and we will be talking a bit about Kraków, provided both recordings and transmissions live of those sessions. And I think that this is an important practice of sessions of any kind about those types of transmissions, especially if they are transcripted, so they are available from people with any kind of problems with accessing media in general. So this is an issue of transparency. Right now, as far as I can tell, the protocols and recordings aren't a problem. There are some inequalities when it comes to transmissions. And last week, I think it was last or 2 weeks on 13th, on press conference of NGOs taking part in those teams working to set a communal forest, could express what kind of challenges they faced, what were their experiences, and most important, criticisms. And to start with the good side, I think that this is important. I personally think this is important that it happened anyway, because it's the first it's an experiment. It never happened before, so even if there were problems, I think that, I hope I'm not too apologetic to just take it into account that this is like baby steps, growing pains. As you say, that civic side could, in a real way, influence and shape areas of forests to be protected, because previous leadership of last points of state forests were mostly working with top-down perspective, with informing model, as Božena was saying. We will tell you what will happen in your forest, and you will be happy that you were informed. So that was a good change, and some cities or some group from cities were expressing satisfaction. I think that in Warsaw and in Kraków there was some good cooperation between all three actors. Another thing that is good and interesting to me personally is that in these meetings, in these proceedings, you had three most important sides: local governments, local activists, and state forests. Because usually it's, as you said, it's a local government and social activists, and there's, this kind of confrontation, but not this time. And what was for me really interesting, for example, in Poznań, city and social activists were basically having the same position. They wanted to protect, I think there was beech trees in the city that state forests wanted to cut down. And this cooperation went so far that I think the organization is called Las jest nasz. Prawo do Przyrody provided a project developed with specialists about forestry, how to set up those forests so you wouldn't harm economy, but you protect forests, and city basically passed it on to state forests. So you had this very tight-knit, very good cooperation. But in Bydgoszcz, city powers wanted to build a road through a forest area, and social activists and state forests had similar positions. And I think that this is an important lesson about looking for alliances in the places you don't necessarily would expect. And even in our practice as Sieć, sometimes you can just find a common language and common perspective with local government, and it goes from both sides. So those are the good things. And as you can see, a list of criticism is longer, and I think that's fair, because I think that the role of social activists is to be maybe overly critical, to push a line a little further. And maybe we'll not go through all of them, but generally speaking, state forests were kind of obstinate. In these procedures, and social activists complain about ministry basically letting state forest control the entire process, about lack of proper oversight. Important aspect, I think, from local government side of view would be probably unequal inclusions of local government, for example, in Łódź, where some local government units weren't even invited. And I think that is also an important thing to be proactive in this kind of situation, to just fight for a place at this table. And as a good practice from the side of local government, we can show Kraków, who worked to engage local community in the process of setting those communal forests. This is a website where locals could basically give a name of a forest, of its coordinates, and tick why the forest is important. There was also a third question I couldn't get on a print screen, which basically was about categorizing those forests. If it's a forest important because of biodiversity, culture, history, and whatnot. And this is very easy for a citizen to fill this kind of website, and that provides real participation. Local government, unfortunately, took care to provide that, but this shows that it's possible, and I think that this is worth it. And to just some early conclusions, because, as I said, it's still going on. If I'm not mistaken, some teams still did not even finish this kind of a trial stage. But first of all, I think that this is important that state forests were exposed to social participation, because it was the first time, I think, in their history, and they had to just take into account what social side wants to say, not to just, tell them how it will be. And this perspective of unobvious alliances, of looking for support from places you wouldn't think to look. And the big question is, will it be a new practice or one-off? Just, it will happen once and there won't be a second council for forest. We hope it will be something permanent, and we will be keeping watch, we'll be monitoring the situation, and we hope the next time we'll bring the good news that there is, third council of forest or fourth or whatever. And that's all I had for today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. My name is Sorin Ionita. I work for a think tank in Bucharest, which is called Expert Forum, and we do a bit of analysis, a bit of tanking, advocacy, very much like K-Monitor. And what I'm going to speak about today, we are fascinated by this process of changing things in the public domain, so transparentization. And the first thing is to build reliable indicators, because like in private management, unless you measure something, it will not change. You don't know what's in there. And then you create instruments also for the public manager to understand better what they do, which is sometimes a problem in the public sector. And then they will have the knowledge, but do they have the willingness to change something? And then you need the second step, which is to open all these instruments to the public, to create pressure on public managers, politicians, to actually change things in that direction. And I have two examples of that. And one is, the second principle we follow is that you should go where the big meat is. The really important things which are sensitive politically and which might change something. And the first example is about intergovernmental finance in Romania. Both examples are some creation in which we contributed. So we lobbied for years to create these instruments, and finally we achieved some sort of success, and you will see what we have done. So what is intergovernmental finance? We start from the reality that in our countries here, in Central Eastern Europe, but also in Europe in general, local governments are mostly financed through central transfers from the central government. It's very rarely the situation where you have enough local taxes and fees. I'm not talking about Budapest, capital cities, but even capital cities in our region, they rely on transfers, not to mention small towns and the big rural areas. And this is very important, how you finance them, because this is actually, and now I'm talking about my country, Romania, but I'll let you to judge about your countries. This is actually the most instruments how you build what we have right now, which is clientelistic politics. This is how they buy and sell mayors, actually. This is how they recruit mayors into parties. This is how they build parties, actually, in our type of clientelistic politics, right? And sometimes you can have a dominant party like in Hungary today, or you have competitive corruption like we have in Romania. But basically, this is one of the fundamental instruments that they use. So if we shed some lights over these things, we might be able to change some things. And this is also important because it's about how they budget, Do you have formulas? If you are elected tomorrow a mayor in a small village here, do you know for the full mandate of 4 years how much money you will have in the 3rd year or in the 4th year? No, you don't. At least in my country, you don't. There are some money like salaries or social subsidies, which are easier to put on a formula, and they're more or less stable in time. And we are going to talk about local investments. So there are grants for local investments, and these are totally unpredictable and politically manipulated. So if you can show something like this is going on, a permanent process of political negotiation, which we call bazaar budgeting, in which you never know how much money you get. You start a multi-year project in your village, but you don't know if the second installment is ever going to come unless you lobby a minister or a deputy or somebody, and then you have a relationship with a company, and you beg them, please go on with the works. I don't have the money now, but the money is going to come. Please believe me, but the money never comes, and something happens then. You have uncertainty, and uncertainty means poor prioritization because you get into projects which are likely to be approved first. Second, you get a very high risk premium from the contractor. I mean, every sane manager in a company, what will they do? They will increase the price because there's uncertainty. They never know when they get the money from you. And you don't know when you get the money from, you know. So things become more expensive because this is a price of uncertainty. Goods for the same 100 euro, you get less in such an environment than in a predictable environment. And it is, I'm not even talking about stealing money, corruption. It's just a natural effect of having an unpredictable system of finance. There are other bad effects, for example. Local leaders like mayors or city councillors or even people at the top of the public administration, who are the most successful? Not those who know the stuff, who come with a Harvard diploma in public administration, but those with the biggest lobby capacity, who know somebody to get the money on time. So in time, you get an adverse selection in the public administration as well. You know, you get these kind of people with these skills, not with technical skills to run properly projects, right? And this is something we notice in Romania. I'm not sure about Hungary, but I see local government people, they will never tell you, but they move away. They are not interested in EU funds anymore because these are difficult to get the projects. You have Olaf looking over your shoulder. You know? There's a different set of legislation applying, tougher. You go for national money if you can have some national money without EU funds involved. And that's a nice thing to have, national funds, you know, through. Now, the fact is, of course, politicians are not stupid, and they created such an instrument in Romania. And I will show what we did about it, but just to summarize the idea, you have the public sector here, and you have the central government and the local governments, which are usually contracting authority when they implement a local project, right? And they get this money through various instruments, from the central budget, line ministries. It differs from country to country, but the logic is the same, right? And this is purely a national process, a political process of allocation. And if you can quantify it and create some rules, then you'll have predictability. If not, not. And then the local government is contracting a company from the private sector, right? And you have the process of procurement. And this is what we obsess mostly about in the European Union. This is where we have rules against conflict of interest, against corruption. This you have procurement rules, which are very well specified, right? Very complicated. But what's the problem here? The problem here is that you might find nothing wrong in the relationship between the mayor and the company, because the toxic relation is here, where the money comes from, the central government, because the money comes here with a little note attached. That company must win. And then you check here, and there's no relationship between the mayor and the company, but the relationship is here. But we never check it. You know, because even the EU says, and we discussed this in Brussels, no, this is a domestic politics. We don't want to get involved into this. But, as you know, in our countries, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Slovakia, this is where the problem is. It comes from the top. And even if you are an honest mayor, either you play the game or you're out. Even the citizens will vote you out because you don't get results with your projects. And so, this being the problem, we created what we called an observatory. So we created a platform, as I told you. Some years ago, our guys, because in politics, because they are smart, they created a big instrument for investments in local government, which is bigger than the EU funds in Romania. It is called, it has a certain name, but it's like a multi-year program to finance local investments allocated by the central government. It is bigger than the regional operational program, actually, with EU funds, which is bad practice in itself because you should leverage EU funds with EU money, but it's completely separate. So we thought, let's monitor what they do. And we created this platform, which is here. And these are all the projects that we have right now in Romania. The color code is a type of project, so it can be water, water sewage, road and bridge. And these are multi-year projects. They are implemented by localities, by local governments, but they get money through a mysterious allocation from the government. And our work now is to create criteria for these allocations, right? But in order to have criteria, first you need to have a map of the problem. And even that took us 2 years to develop. This, what you see right now, this is a browser. It's not a print screen. This is in real time on the website of the Ministry of Regional Development. So we work under the radar of the cabinet ministers who are busy with their political fights, and they probably didn't even know what we were doing at the beginning inside the ministry. We work with civil servants in the ministry, and there is a very nice database here. And then if you go near the border with Hungary, for example, let's take one locality here. This is Nicolau Român, so this is a project going on. It's a database. It shows you, it took us 2 years to persuade them to give every project a code in order to put them in a regular database. And then you see what kind, it's road, right? And again, it's a value. And we were fighting to include measurements of physical implementation. So not just at the beginning, there's a project of this value, but where are we now? I should see in real time the physical stage of implementation and the disbursement of money in real time. So not just the description of the project at the beginning. And we are working now to, and you can see it here, yeah? So this is probably a road. The other one is water sewage, anyway. So this is a picture of the country, and there is a database behind it. These are simply Excel files, which are updated every 3 months or so. So you really download them, and you see everything in there. And we are working now to integrate all these data about projects with the fiscal number of the company, which is implementator for every project. And then we will have this database, I mean, we are already doing it, to build nice indicators. For example, likelihood to get a project based on political affiliation of mayors. Now, like in Hungary, we have over 3,000 local governments, so the statistic is robust. You can do statistics on over 3,000 cases. And then, even more refined, what they call social network analysis, because we will see the owners of the companies based on the fiscal number from the registry of companies, and it's a very simple artificial intelligence device, and see what the network is. And probably we will be able to document the real toxic relationship, which is with the daughter or the lover of the minister or whoever, because this is what is important. And this, what I showed you here, is open to the public because everything is in real time. This is the name of this project. He's an engineer from the 19th century, but it doesn't matter. It's a typical local investment program, which is carried out by many governments in our region. And I think this is one of the areas we should go for, because 80% of political clientele is financed through this instrument, at least in Romania. The rest through different state-owned companies. I think we will be able to write reports about this kind of connections, and this is what hurts them. When they realize what we do, I hope they will not destroy the database, which is on the website of the Ministry of Regional Development, that I think they will not, because we will integrate it in some European projects, put it under Brussels, and then it was a real hell to develop it, for very simple practical details, but it works. And then I will shift very quickly to the second example, which is shorter, and is just about the municipality of Bucharest. Current slide. A typical municipal company, a central heating system, but not like any other building. Unlike in Central Europe here, unlike in Budapest, this is actually the major problem of Bucharest city. It is a black hole for money. It is an unsolved problem, district heating, because it was built under the communist regime, like 50, 60 years, very centralized, and there's a lot of path dependence now in this infrastructure. You cannot decentralize it very quickly. It's inefficient, creaky, it's leaking all the time, and we throw good money after bad, into this system, and it is very big. I mean, the rumor is the second biggest in Europe after Moscow. I never checked that. I don't know what they do in St. Petersburg or in other big cities, but it's definitely bigger than here. I have also some numbers, but these are just to show you what kind of clients they have. So about 1 million residential units are connected. More than half of Bucharest, actually. It's very, very centralized. But the really shocking figure is this one. It eats up almost a quarter of the budget of Bucharest in terms of subsidies. A quarter of the budget of Bucharest city is this bloody district heating company. And nobody knew what was going on with it. It was, the collapsing, the service was poor. We didn't know. People were getting nervous every time when the winter was approaching. What is going to happen, right? So they should provide hot water all year round and heating during the cold season. What we did, again, we lobbied them. It was easier because the current mayor was re-elected. It's a bit of oppositionist, two-tail dog kind of party. Of course, at odds with the government. So we were able to get into the database of this company and to put some order a bit in it. And it also functions in real time. And I'll just show you what it is. So this is Bucharest City. Again, this is browser. This is in real time. Their termoficare. And these are the 1,000 substations. So there are big power plants, and then the mains going to substations, and then the substations distributed in the secondary circuit. The green, it means it functions properly right now. Red is a problem, and you see there's stoppage in 23 of them, and deficiency in supply in 9 of them. And this is really in real time. I can check my house now if I have hot water or not. Here, it's normal, but let's go to one which is not normal. And what you see is the address, of course, the reason why it was stopped, and when they are supposed to finish with work on the remedies. Now, this is good. It's nice, and people check it, people use it, it's very popular. The trick is, behind it, there's a big database, because this data is not deleted. This is a flash picture, but we can build time series, based on areas, and try to see where are the problems, where are the most frequent problems, why, and then create annual databases with a deficient quality of service. And open it to the public, and these reports will come from us this winter, and you create pressure from the public, actually, for them to report back based on some, systematic indicators. Because so far, they were just hysterical discussions. Why it is collapsing in my area, but nobody knew where is it actually worse, where is better, and so on and so forth. So these are the two examples. One is a little bit macro, if you want, about how you allocate money to local governments. I think this is really, really important, because this is how politics is run, and you go at the core of it. If you can fix allocations for investments, right? And eliminate this effect when they get money in September and you spend it up to December or you lose it. That's a situation many mayors are in. And then this is very suboptimal because it's money wasted, actually, in a way, unless you can create a longer term. And this one, it's a typical municipal company where people are not necessarily they don't have evil intentions. It's just chaos inside. It's a chaotic company spending 1/4 of the budget of Bucharest City. And somebody needs to put order in. Nobody will do it unless there's pressure from the public. If we go there at experts and writing reports, they will put it in a drawer, and that would be it. But if you mobilize population and show them some indicators, they will ask the relevant questions. And hopefully in the next round of local elections we will have a discussion about this based on these instruments, and thank you very much.
So I guess we come from the civil society sector, and we do this because on the one side we think this is ethically necessary that we watch public funds, what's going to happen, and we think transparency is like a fundamental thing that's important. But don't we all also do this because there is no bottom-up pressure, and then we hope that because we put pressure on the politicians, they provide transparency, and then the people will realize like transparency is good, and then this will generate more interest and more pressure from the public. And I was just wondering if you have any good examples or experience where it's like, okay, we have good examples, bad examples, and good examples, and if you have any, I don't know, feedback from citizens or the cities themselves where they were like, yeah, it actually, transparency made our life so much easier, and it's finally not just the NGOs who are pushing for it. This is kind of a broad, just starting question, and then we can go into the specifics, but I wonder if any of you have a good answer to this. I would be happy to hear.
I can say something. Yeah. For us, I guess an example of this is, it's not like every day that you'll get citizens to participate in local politics, right? But we have like cases, like once something goes bad, then there's need for transparency, and that's why you basically need it all the time, right? So I don't know, I have like a very specific example of a Slovenian municipality that at some point their sewage bill shot up for this and that reason, right? And it was instant, and the prices went up 100, 200% from this month to the next month, right? And at that point, everybody started to sort of notice, oh, this entire process isn't transparent. I can't find voting records, who voted for this, who brought up this act, why did it shoot up, right? Why did the prices come? And so even though in a day-to-day basis, right, you don't maybe notice the need for openness and transparency of these processes, it does come and the need does exist, right? And this is like an example I have. Sure, we also do like participatory budgeting is again a good example where maybe you sort of need to hone a culture of telling people, you know, there's more than just going to vote every 4 years, you know, and then they sort of, like I said, it's kind of a mindset. You need to sort of grow democracy like a garden, you know. You have to put love into it, and then people find out, oh, I can actually participate and, you know, have agency to make my life better. Because I'd say municipalities have a much bigger impact on a person's life maybe than than national governments, right? And so there's need, but you also need to put work into it to to educate, I guess, and to give people the chance to see that they can make changes.
Thanks. I totally agree with Nate. I think the prevention as such is not very sexy thing in our region. People don't like going to have a colonoscopy, just as they don't like preventive transparency measures. I think it's very similar in that case, and but sometimes we are surprised by the results. For example, and to give an example where politicians actually took our advice after the last regional transparency audit, one of the regions, the new government that formed right after our audit was published, they put in their own declaration that they want to follow our recommendations, which is an example that was not anticipated, but very welcomed.
From our perspective, transparency and participation, it's something that has higher upfront costs than in the long run, because we also know some local government officials and local governments that took a chance with more transparency, and it turns out that it actually becomes easier for them to govern and manage. For example, if you proactively put data online, then you don't have to struggle with files about this information that you need to answer every one of them. And if the person who sent it doesn't like the answer, they take you to court, and that, the costs multiply. And this is something what we try to promote. I do agree about this kind of negative outlook that was a problem. Then we start to wonder, and we had in my opinion, a fun example in Krakow a few years ago, when there was a donation to the local budget, about 10 million zlotys, from some guy, in a sense that local government did not want to tell who did it and why. And it was like such an obviously interesting thing that looks bad, like from obvious reasons, that we still try to figure out who this guy was, but I think it's not like some kind of big corruption, but this kind of knee-jerk reaction to say no, that makes government look shady, that makes people interested, that makes people ask questions, that makes government answer those questions, and suddenly we collectively wasted like 100 hours on something that could be, done with one sentence on the website. So I think that what's important to me is that transparency is just cheaper and simpler, even if it seems, daunting or difficult when you start.
The question basically is, how can a minority, if the mayor is only supporting the majority that elects them, what can a minority do in an issue? How can you mobilize the minority, and how can you persuade the mayor to represent your interests if you are not their voters?
Just the background you were sharing, that they're working around the airport of Budapest, which causes a lot of pollution, and they're the people living around the airport, and of course there locally they are concerned, but as the city as a whole, or even the national government, which of course earns a lot of money with the airport and wants to even expand it, how can, or do you have examples, do you know of cases when local groups that are kind of in a minority against the majority, or who don't care, advocate for their rights, because they're suffering from that for 27 years?
Yeah, this is a typical problem, which is a problem of negative externalities of something which are concentrated in a small community. So it's nothing new. It's like a new landfill that, for garbage that nobody wants in their vicinity, but it must be put somewhere, or a garbage incinerator, and so on and so forth. So there are ways to resolve it with a compromise, or to imagine some compensations for the community in Feriheg, because it's not conceivable that they will move the airport anytime soon, and it will be the same problem everywhere. So a system of compensations, but you must have a citizen group. You might raise it up in terms of visibility and discuss it, because there's no other arena. And minorities in general, this is why we don't have minimal democracy. Like the majority rules, you vote once every 4 years, and then the majority does whatever they want. No, this is why we have rule of law, where minorities, where they have a legitimate case, must be protected in every way. But how? There is no formula. It must be permanent discussion, and in Feriheg, a group must be created, actually, and to explore possibilities of compensation for the negative externalities that they suffer. There's no other way, actually. And actually, Feriheg will be extended, the airport. So not only that it will not move, but it will be bigger. So that's it.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a question, or can I ask? Okay. I have a few specific questions, but let's go for Sorin. What can a municipality do to avoid overpriced procurement procurement, because you introduced this sort of big schematic, but if I'm a mayor and I want to avoid, but I also don't want to play the clientelistic game, like how can I show at least to the population that these are the prices that I get? Is there a way to like open this up to the people from a mayor's side?
So this is like an economics model. So we assume that you are an honest mayor, that you don't play other kind of games, right? And you really want to do good for your community. Then you depend on these games. You play a game which is not designed by you. And if you get money, as I said, the budget allocation suddenly in October, and you must spend it until December because you get it back, or they will subtract it from your next year budget, which is the same thing. Then what can you do? You buy something which is overpriced because otherwise you lose the money completely. So this is a dilemma in which most of the small rural mayors are in, actually, in all our countries, actually.
And you have no single example from Romania where you could observe that somehow a city or a community managed to get out of it because it's such a systemic thing?
No, actually the practice varies in territory. Like in Hungary, like everywhere else, where we have many thousands of communities, some are better than others. Some can plan even in adverse circumstances, and there are localities which are showcases of good management. And when they come and visit, visits from abroad, it's usually the ones you point at because they want to be there and to learn how they did the business park, how did they manage to integrate, even in a rural community. So yeah, you can do some things, but we are talking here public policy. We should improve the environment for everyone, so that they can flourish, not just the very brilliant ones or who have the best connections.
And a question to Tomáš. You presented some good examples on information on council members, and I was wondering if you found any examples where they also regularly report on their activities and have like on the municipality webpage where basically they are accountable based on what they do and not just like contact information or party membership, or is that something that you know about?
Yes, I think I think even the city of Liberec that I showed, some of the members of the council do have like a blog or something where they showcase what they have achieved, but there's a but to it. I think about like promoting your work as a representative, the best option you have is the municipal newspaper, which to us is a big issue because usually it's managed by the governing party and it's very often used for propaganda, especially before, as you head for election. It's basically all like photos of the current mayor with all the projects he has achieved. There's no criticism, etc. There's very weak laws or legislation in Czechia, and so I think this is a wider problem on how to look at this presentation of what you achieve and where to put it. Maybe the website of the municipalities is a good place because you already anticipate it's kind of a promo. It's your blog. You don't see it as a newspaper, So.
Okay, thank you. I think our time is up, but there are so many topics that we could be talking about. There's so much that I'm interested in terms of like how do you get the municipality of Belgrade on board with like more invested urban planning, because it's like seems like a lot of hassle, or is the data on the public heating system reliable, because like or how do the workers who are working on the heating system report back so that it can be live reported on a website? So I have a lot of questions that we could talk about, but I think, Szymon, something you mentioned, I want to end this discussion on reiterating that. is one of the best feedbacks that we have received from Hungarian municipalities is that because they publish so much information on their own website, basically their work on responding to freedom of information requests is reduced. So they can just reply with a simple link, it's on the website, or even there's a reduction of freedom of information requests. And I think this is probably one of the few metrics that we have found as a sign of how can we measure the benefit of transparency. This could be a starting point for a new argument, or like we could discuss this as a debate. But I want to leave it off on this thought, and thank you very much for the presentations. Sorin wants to add something.
A very quick thank you note to Tomáš for the metaphor with the colonoscopy, because it fits perfectly my second example. This is what you do when you look at the city and the pipes and you put them in public. You actually put the colonoscopy of the city in public. I will use it for as a title for our second example. Yeah, big pipes for that with hot water.
So thank you very much, and we'll continue in 10 minutes.